this panel I mentioned last week that we were interviewing from these different sectors, we asked them, what kind of questions what are they seeking when they're looking for either interns, even, some students in high school that they're looking to intern. They'll say one of the key questions we ask is, what is a project that you've been involved in? It'd be a real shame if our students didn't have an answer to that, right? Yep.
Well, and then the follow-up, I'm sure, was, and how did you face a challenge and get over that, right?
Right.
So a project and then the challenge. And if you can demonstrate that you've thought through an entire systemic project and you're resilient, you're way in front of everybody, of other people.
Absolutely. So, I know that around the work that you're talking about, the research is really clear that, business and industry are looking for young people that oftentimes they can teach them the discrete knowledge that is necessary for a particular position, but they're wanting these other skills that are necessary. Students that can, the research is clear on this, been tons of research on it. We need young people who communicate, who can collaborate, who can problem solve, who can who are innovative and, who are learners that can really learn into a situation. So that's impetus for some of this kind of thinking differently about our education systems, but it's also around what we're learning now more than ever before around the science of learning and how people best learn. I feel like these line up so well. So people that might be a little bit critical or suspect of why are we changing, why are we pushing a change in our educational systems today? It's fine the way it is, or the traditional model is fine. What would you say to that?
I would say every generation learns differently. And there's two choices we have as adults. Either we can try to unlearn the generation of kids the way that they learn naturally and force them to learn the way that we learned, or, which I think is a much better practice, is we adjust our instructional strategies and practices to meet the learning needs of this generation. And our world is evolving, right? We should not want to produce graduates that have the exact same skill set as previous generations if we want to say the greatest global society the world has ever seen, right? And so when you think about jobs that are being taken up by technology now, right? Like, we know there's some jobs are going away. Well, there's two things you can do. You can complain about it, or you can build the technology, And our argument would be build the technology, learn how to fix the technology, and ensure that students have that adaptability and the flexibility and being able to communicate, being able to problem solve, or I like solution find better than problem solving, because I've had some people that have spent a lot of time defining problems that I'd much rather focus on finding solutions. But that's what the work has to be about, and you can say what you want about technology. Karen, I don't think it's going away. So, the reality is we have to embrace the opportunity that's provided to us to prepare our students to be able to use whatever the technology is, but not just the way it is right now. That's why the creativity, the whole STEAM concept of adding the arts into the technology, engineering, and math becomes so critical for people, And so I would just say to those that are not supportive of kind of reimagining the next iteration of public education, we're trying to prepare your children to be successful in a world that doesn't even exist yet, and with jobs that we don't know what they're going to look like. None of us even knew Chat GPT 6 months ago, right? And you can either complain about it or embrace it, right? I saw somebody about a week and a half ago have their phone on with Chat GPT to have a student or have a teacher talk about a special needs student, no names, of course. And at the end of that person talking for about 10 minutes, created a whole IEP. And when asked the team said, that's just as good, if not better, than what we wrote. Well, imagine the time that could save that would allow those educators to be focused on working with their students rather than working on paperwork.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is just endless as to really thinking about innovations in the area of technology and how we're utilizing those to make our, to accelerate improvement or to make our work maybe more efficient. But even for our students, I mean, think about, people are so concerned about, now GPT is going to write papers. That may or may not be the case in some, certain circumstances, but think about the skills we could teach our young people because that's not always exactly accurate, but the ability to read a paper and correct it, to assess what's correct and what's incorrect. So I think it's not only using those resources, but it's also thinking about the careers for the future that will be when people are scared that, we're going to lose jobs to AI or lose jobs to technology. We also know the research is clear. It also creates new jobs around that technology, right? You still will need human beings who can use those skills, those technologies, wherever they are, and really bring them to life in response to challenges and needs in our society.
And that should inform our practice, right? So we should be spending time on editing or thinking about spending time on editing. And I think, from a communication perspective, the AI is only as good as the questions that are put in as prompts. So I think they call them now prompt engineers. I think that's the name that they're called. But working with our kids to make sure they're asking the right question of the right person at the right time. I think that's another skill that we should be using the technology to help guide our adult work in providing those instructional practices.
And the other thing I think is really powerful is this is not a fad. This isn't just a new thing. Since the 1990s, we've learned more about how human beings best learn than ever before. And if you think about it, our traditional model of education hasn't changed that much since the 1990s. And we know full well that sitting in rows, doing independent work is not how human beings best learn. That learning is a social endeavor, that conversation and the opportunity to really engage in work is a much more, opportunity for the brain to learn and to absorb and to wrestle with discrete content or knowledge or understandings. And so I think we're learning more and more and more about what's needed for the workforce and how that's changing, and then also how do human beings best learn. I think these things line up so nicely with this report.
Well, I think that, just supports the work that you all do with your profiles, right? So are we making sure that we're living and breathing what is the best research for our learners and our adults and all stakeholders? I mean, we learned during the pandemic we needed to provide a lot more support to our parents on how to support their kids using technology, and so making sure that we're thinking about, and that's one of the things, from the commission's report that we talked about, that all community members are learners and stakeholders, and we need to provide support for all learners in our community.
Yeah, I have seen for myself as a school superintendent and then now at Battelle for Kids, the power of broadly engaging your community and shaping the future direction of your school system. And I've always reminded people, the schools are not the superintendent's schools. It's not that principal school. It's the community schools. They're paying the taxpayer dollars for that school. They're contributing and investing in that school system. The community should have a say. And first of all, and secondly, and when they do have a meaningful say, it can create such positive goodwill in the community around an understanding and commitment toward everyone, the broader community, investing in all the young people in that community. I just think it's such a powerful, and if you think about it, when people say, well, it was better in the past, well, I can tell you in the past, I'm not sure too many communities had a meaningful say in the direction of their school system.
I'm also not sure every student who came to school had it better than in the past than they do today, or they will tomorrow.
I agree with that as well. But I would also say that never, this community grassroots effort to set the direction of the system in light of how the world is changing, because I think that's a really important piece of this. It's not just asking people their thoughts, but really sharing with them the research around how the world is changing and the implications for our young people. But even beyond that, it will never, ever, ever take the place of a parent working with a teacher to meet the needs of their individual child. That will never supplant that. That's still at its core a fundamental and important piece of meeting the needs of every child and working with their parents.
Yeah, it's one of our core belief statements at AASA that the parent is key to the whole education process, and they should be as engaged and involved as they can be and they want to be. But their role, it is instrumental in the growth and development of that child over time. Agree 1,000%, Karen.
Yeah, and so it's not an or, it's an and. The community voice, and you know what? I have grandchildren in schools today, and to me, I think there's something really powerful and affirming that a community has a voice in the school my grandchildren go to. But at the same time, I know my kids are involved with their children's teachers and making sure their individual needs are being met. It doesn't supplant that. It's an and, I think.
Yeah, it has to be a partnership. And all that can do is benefit the student if the parent and the teacher are working together.
So I want to ask you about the notion of future-driven, because I know it's something that's important to you. I know it's in a lot of the literature from AASA. I just thought it'd be important for our listeners to understand what do we mean, what do you mean by being future-driven?
For sure. So I think we've been talking about future focus forever, at least my entire time in education. But future focus is about thinking. And as you just said, Karen, from the 1990s to today, we've seen pockets of excellence across the country, but in so many other places, our classrooms look like they did 40, 50 years ago. And that's not okay, And so for me, future driven means action. And that's what I want us to be. I want us to act to ensure that we're providing the best education possible in each community for every single child. And we can do that if we work together. But we can't do it if we're just going to stay over in this thinking space and have conversations. We have got to act. And that's why I personally love the future-driven piece of the work, or part of the work.
Yeah, and I think you described earlier why that's important too, and that is we have to be thinking about how we're preparing the young people of today for their futures, not our past.
Yep.
And I think we have to be action-oriented around that. I also feel like this isn't hyperbole. I really think we're at a tipping point in education systems today. When we have, challenges certainly that I think are daunting, that require our attention and our action. Our pipeline, for an example, is one of the things. I think educational equity is still something that I know people are, that term has gotten some pushback, but I just can't understand how anyone could be against educational equity, meeting the needs of every child. I think that's why we exist as school district leaders, is meeting the needs of every child. So I just wanted you to comment on those things.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to what I mentioned earlier and why I really appreciate the work of the commission. Because if we're, from an educational equity perspective, right, if we are meeting every student where they are at, we should be able to accelerate their learning, every student, right? But that can't happen if we don't teach them where they're at. If we're teaching them way below where they're at or way above where they're at, we're doing a disservice to both of those kids. So that's why these personalized pathways of choice within the proximal zone of development, I just think is so critical to the whole educational equity perspective. And our belief that no learner should be marginalized. Well, the way no learner is marginalized is, again, teach them where they're at and provide those instructional practices. That's why it's critical for teachers to be able to know where all their students are at, right? And be given the resources to take that next step and provide the instructional practices within where they're currently learning.
And we're not talking about a zero-sum game.
Correct.
We're not talking about if we give one child more attention or more of something because that's what they need, that it's taking anything away from another student. I do feel like when we're adequately resourced and we have, we've invested in our staff So we have teachers that are well equipped and our leaders are well equipped. We can meet the needs of all children within a system. But we have to think differently about the traditional model. The traditional model is to some extent a one size fits all.
Yep, I agree with that. And I also think that it impacts professional development dollars and teacher prep programs. Because if higher ed is preparing students to teach to the students of yesterday rather than the students of tomorrow, then it's incumbent upon districts to do the exact same thing I just talked about with the kids, unlearn the way that they were taught to teach and teach them the best practices. So I think that's important. That's important as well. And I think is a positive if we talk about, again, that whole love of learning, right? If our teacher prep students love the learning they're receiving, they're going to stretch and they're going to see it in their kids, their students, and it's going to cause everybody then to continue to grow, put the love back in learning. More people then hopefully want to enter the teaching profession, which then means we'll have a greater pool of people looking for administrative positions, because that pool is really weak in a lot of places right now. And I don't mean with quality candidates, I just mean in pure numbers of candidates. And those are the people who hopefully will then become future district office leaders and superintendents. And like I said at the beginning, there's no better job than a superintendent, 86% of the time.
I loved the job when I was a superintendent, but I also love being a principal and a teacher. So I think there's nothing better, I don't believe, than being an educator. I think it's a important profession, and one that I think that people are doing really high quality, meaningful work. So I give so much credit to our people who are out there in the field today doing this really, really important work. And I couldn't think of a better profession for people that really want to give back to their community. So a couple of questions we have in the time we have left, and that is, what do you think is on the horizon for our educational systems, and kind of what do you think system leaders should be thinking about?
I think system leaders should be thinking about how to encourage staff and their leaders, their principals, to thinking about tomorrow. And I'll get to the tomorrow piece in a second, but they have to be encouraged to embrace some new things and to try new things, and that are research-based, and that makes sense. And I think the way of tomorrow is going to be districts and states having to choose between whether or not they're going to embrace technology or they're going to try to not embrace technology and shut down technology. And I would just say this to those that are thinking about restraining or constraining the use of technology: your kids are going to use it anyway. So why not help them to use it in a responsible manner and help teach them how to best access what they should be accessing, using what they should be using, the way they should be using it. But if you think you're going to eliminate the use of technology, you're never going to meet the need of every student. It's impossible not to marginalize some students, and you're not going to be preparing them for the world they're going to inherit. It's almost that simple, Karen, from my perspective.
And I think too, when I mentor new superintendents or school leaders, I always ask them kind of, what is the work that you want to lead? What kind of impact do you want to have on your systems? And I think it's the same as what we described earlier with teachers. I think leaders really want to have this far-reaching impact and really want to lead the innovative work that we're talking about. But it's a lonely job. So I think one of the things I would advise them to do is look and find those other districts throughout. It may not be in your region of the country, region of your state, where there are innovative school system leaders, but they're out there. They're out there. They're in our networks. They're working with AASA in so many ways. Find people that are doing the kind of work that inspires you and be in community with them, and it'll help you accelerate the work. And, also will give you wonderful ideas from how they're approaching the work. I will see so many great examples of really innovative work that's going on in all different places across the country. And it will spark an idea for a superintendent in another place. And you know what? When they implement it, it's equally amazing, but it's different. So I feel like it's not a cookie cutter kind of work we're talking about, either in the commission or what our organizations do, but it's an opportunity to take an idea and localize it and make it your own.
I say all the time, you should not adopt what worked in my former district. You should adapt it to your context. Don't try and adopt anything, because every context is different. But I've never been to a site visit where I haven't come back and thought about doing something differently or enhance or improve or tweak. Like every time I go, and you and I are very similar, that we love to learn. We love to have our mindset expanded. So, I agree. I would say being a superintendent or a school leader is a lonely job if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. Between your network, between our cohorts, there are plenty of opportunities for you to find like-minded people with whatever it is that inspires your greatest level of learning, and encourage you to continue to do the work. But I'll be honest with you, Karen, I'm very concerned with school and system leaders who became leaders during COVID, because all they know is managing. And for most superintendents and principals, it was management for about 18 months there, And so I don't think that's the way to sustain yourself as a leader. But if you didn't have any experiences in taking time to read some magazines and to grow professionally, listen to podcasts like this, go research websites of best practices. If you didn't have time to do that, which we didn't have a lot of time for those 18, 24 months, it may not be part of your just normal cadence of leadership. And you have to give yourself time. Like, if the one thing I would say to anybody who's listening, give yourself permission to dream and lead for excellence. That's where the fun of the work is. That's where the transformational work is in changing your community for the better, right? And providing opportunities for every kid. That's what's awesome about this work, right? Not figuring out how far apart lunch tables have to be.
Yeah, I agree. And it's really stepping back and being a reflective learner and thinking about, where am I spending all my time and energy?
Yeah. And
if it's all on the things that you just described, that it can be draining as a person. You need to balance. Hey, we're real. There are things that happen in school districts. You and I both know this as former superintendents, that you have to deal with, right? When something happens, you have to deal with it. But if that's all you spend your time and energy on, you need to step back and think, okay, how am I investing in my own learning? How am I leading this district so that I'm an inspirational leader that's really helping everyone through the system see the future and not the day-to-day problems? And I'm of the opinion you can do both. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can deal with those problems that are the day-to-day, really challenging problems, while also keeping your focus on the future.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. And I tell aspiring leaders all the time, do not keep your email open the entire day, because you're going to you can completely get managed by the dings, right? Every time a new ding hits, you have to go look at it. No way, man. Give yourself chunks of time to lead, to get out in buildings, see what's going on, talk with other people. Don't manage your entire day through emails and little red mailboxes flipping up. So,
Dave, I could talk with you all day, because I just think you're such an extraordinary leader and have such depth of knowledge and understanding around education and leadership. So I want to finish, our time together, complete this time with asking you about, what are you excited about with regard to the future of AASA, and what do you hope is on the horizon for that work for AASA?
I'm super, super excited about a lot of things, Karen. I think probably most so ensuring that we have robust, aspiring pipelines. Our kids deserve the best of the best in our school system leaders, and then supporting and ensuring the support for people that are currently in the role. Through professional development, through different cohorts, through partnering with Battelle for Kids, with the networks, with your networks, the profile work that you do. And then I just think we're at I agree with you. I think we're just at this juncture of time where if we're intentional and strategic about the work, I really think we can get to scale with some transformational work to really ensure that all of our systems are preparing students for the world of tomorrow, not yesterday.
So I think the opportunities are just so exciting that of the work and the impact that AASA can have. I've long been a member of AASA. I can't even remember how long I've been a member, a long, long, long time. But, it's one of I believe, the premier national organization for school system leaders. And I think there's just a wonderful opportunity for you all to kind of shape the direction, help us think differently about the future of education. And we're very, very excited that you're going to be taking the helm or have taken the helm. And just know that myself and my organization, and I know many, many people throughout the country are wishing you well and standing in your corner and helping us make this shift as educational system. So thank you for your courageous leadership. And just know that we're all here to support you in any way we can.
Thanks, Karen. I've long respected you and your work and your leadership. So it's really fun to be able to partner with organizations like yours to move the conversation forward. And that's exactly what we're going to continue to do in the days, weeks, and years to come.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate your time today, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Be well.